This is Rabbi Daniel Sher. I'm here teaching this morning for Rabbi Amy Bernstein as she finishes some really sacred work being at the After the Fire National Conference. And so I will be with all of you this morning. It's funny, we say Shabbat Shalom before Shabbat starts. And at some point, there's actually an argument, according to the rabbis, about when one can start saying Shabbat Shalom. Is it Wednesday evening, or is that too far away? Is it Thursday evening? Can you have to wait till Friday morning? And there's a lot of different questions. That's like, this is what we're spending our time arguing about. But it is. And there's a few reasons for that. One being the familiarity alone, the psychology behind hearing the phrase Shabbat Shalom. And psychology, both in words and in material things, is something that our tradition puts a lot of time and energy thinking about. And so as I was reading about this week's Torah, I kind of stopped and thought for a moment about the idea that there are certain objects that begin as ordinary in our lives, for many of us, for almost all of us. And over time, those objects become sacred. A photograph once casually just placed on the shelf that was there because it was the newest photograph, but somehow becomes a permanent fixture over decades. A siddur, that's been used. I have a siddur from high school that, thank God, was not in my home, that I still have after the fires. Small items that survive something you didn't expect to survive hold new meanings. And at first, they're all simple things. And then, as many of us know, in fact, all of us, but in different categories know, life happens and losses happen and growth happens. And suddenly, those things aren't decorative. Those things aren't ordinary anymore. They're repositories. They hold their own stories and they instigate an experience in us when we're with them. They hold weight, and you don't keep them. You don't not keep them because you're afraid of forgetting. You keep them because remembering has become part of who you are. And I've been thinking about that a lot in general, because when you lose those items, it's a different process of recovery and rebuilding. It's not the same as walls, right? It's something different. But also because in this Torah portion, can anyone tell me what portion we're on, by the way? On a Saturday morning Torah study, I always ask if anyone knows the name of this week's portion to see who's done a little bit of homework.
Tetzaveh.
Tetzaveh, that's right. So in this week's portion, the Torah is offering a lot about, as Bert mentioned before we began, mentioned about fashion, but specifically something really interesting that jumped out at me was that it's a version of this same instinct, this same idea of memory ends up being in this. So in that, we have this piece. And when the Kohen Gadol enters the Holy of Holies, he doesn't enter alone. He carries the names of the tribes of Israel engraved in 2 stones on his shoulders, stones of remembrance for the children of Israel, and Aaron bears them on his 2 shoulders before God for remembrance. And then over his heart, again, the Torah insists, Lizkor lifnei Adonai tamid, for remembrance before God always. Shoulders and heart, this weight that we can bear and the feelings that we can contain. Structure and emotion. The Torah is building this psychological architecture right from the beginning and saying you may need to wear it as a reminder in that space. So before we even dive too far in, are there things that you have worn, things that you put on that help to put you into a specific space or a specific time? Yeah, Susan.
I wear my Godsmack t-shirts to Torah study because I feel Godsmacked when I study Torah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Rachel?
The first thing that came to mind for me, tells you a lot about me, is I always, even if I'm not wearing like an outright suit, I always dress differently for work.
Okay.
Even if I'm doing like a virtual meeting and I'm in my home office, I'm still dressed differently.
I remember rabbinical school talking about the weather just now, as you all were. And it was very, very hot when we first landed in Israel in July. And I wore shorts throughout the year because that's what one does. And towards the end of the year, I thought, when I become a rabbi, I'm going to be taken serious. I had to wear pants every day, not shorts. Like, for whatever reason in my head, I was like, pants. And I started that next summer in Israel, and it was brutally hot, but wearing pants. And to this day, like my wife will make jokes about the fact like you don't see congregants in shorts. Like you only see congregants wearing pants, like when you're in pants. And pants for some reason became the like more serious, elevated. And over time that kept going to where I'm wearing a t-shirt today because it's two dinosaurs saying Shabbat Shalom to each other and I'm with the preschool. But generally it's always a button-down shirt of some kind or a jacket or some way to elevate the outfit. Not only
Yeah.
for myself, you are certainly right. It's a challenge that I'm sure many of you, when COVID first started, and you could like wear a jacket up top but have gym shorts on. And then over time, people stopped doing that because it psychologically was really a mind game. But also,
Yeah.
I feel a lot of responsibility as I think this Torah portion is going to be reflecting that what I wear is a symbol to the people I meet with about the level of responsibility and care I'm willing to put into the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's very true. Yeah, Bert and Lori after Bert.
I always wear a kippah when I go into a synagogue, whether I'm going there just to go to the office or whatever. It's just a habit I got into. Even in a Reformed synagogue where it's not customary to do that, and of course talit. But those have religious significance to me. I used to have, before the fire, several talitot that were very meaningful for me, including the one I wore at my bar mitzvah, that I wore at my grandson Jacob's bar mitzvah, and that was very. Although when I was 13, it wasn't special.
No, that's the whole point, isn't it? When you're 13, it was just the item they handed you, and over time, it built that meaning. And one of the challenges that I think we're going to try to tackle in this Torah portion is, okay, as Rabbi Amy said, not long after the fire, like we're a people of tchotchkes. So like, don't tell us not to be sad about some of the things we lost because our tradition knows all too well. Put that tchotchke on the shelf and it's going to grow in power because of the memory and the love and the tangible nature and whatever. So there's a piece to that too, and how our tradition responds to the moments of loss like that. Lori.
Well, I definitely love wearing clothes from my grandmothers. And I will often wear clothes from my grandmothers if I'm going to temple, if I'm going to meet somebody important, so that I feel, and I oftentimes will feel them. I like it on my heart, around my heart, and are embracing me. So I'll feel like I'm being embraced by my grandmothers who are both passed a long time ago.
Yeah. What that also reminds me of is this next little point about Torah. If Aaron walks in with the names of the tribes and with a transcription, an inscription that says that remembrance before God always, the high priest can't step into the Holy of Holies unburdened. That's not an option in our tradition. When you put on something of another generation, you actually do carry a little bit of the burden of their story. And we feel that. When I wear something old or given to me, the story of the gift is worn with me. The high priest cannot step in unburdened. He must carry memory physically and not lightly. Names are engraved, not written in ink. Covenant, fracture, promise, survival, all of it etched into stone. The weight of that memory and responsibility bearing down. But the Torah does not say this so that Aaron will remember, right? It says it's before God. So what does it mean to remind God through memory and items and sanctity and that quality? What does it mean to remind God? Surely the Torah doesn't imagine divine forgetfulness, right? It wouldn't make sense if we have an omniscient God that we also have a God that would need a gentle nudge, right? I have to remind my son to put shoes on before he walks out the door to school sometimes because he's so distracted by other things. He needs that nudge. Surely God does not mean divine nudges. So what do you think it could mean for us to remind God? Yeah, Rachel.
Is this sort of like the idea maybe of the Hidor? I don't know if I'm saying it right. The
Hidor
Hidor
mitzvah?
mitzvah. Yeah, when you're elevating the mitzvah. So like, it's not enough to just, pour the wine into like, a glass. But if I use my Kiddush cup, then I'm I'm elevating it. If I have a beautiful,
I certainly think the memory and items and love we put into the items has hidur mitzvah to it. But I want to focus a little bit more on this notion of what it means to remind God. Because the phrase zichron lifnei Adonai tamid, we have to really wrestle with for remembrance before God always. The Hebrew suggests that it's about reminding God. We can have absolutely another conversation about whether or not it's a reminder for us in divine relationship. But if it starts with reminding God, what could it possibly mean for us to remind God? Yeah, Bert.
Connect.
To connect, okay.
Right, because remember, it was just a couple of Torah portions ago where God, the Israelites were groaning in Egypt, and God remembered them. And we learned that that's not because God forgot, but remember in that case is more like took notice of. And so for me, it's kind of like a reaching out. It's a mutual thing. We're reaching out to God, and God responds to our reaching out. And the act of wearing whatever we're wearing or bringing it is our act of stepping into godliness. And there's an idea that somehow godliness responds. I don't understand what I just said, but it sounded to me like...
Okay, so I actually think I do, Bert. It's bringing me to another space, which is we have a belief that we're each a spark of the divine, right? There's some Kabbalist pieces to it, but let's not believe that it's only in mysticism that we find this. If we are made in the image of God, if we're B'Tselem Elohim, and then if our souls are actually a spark of the divine, whether it be explained by the holy vessel or by the notion that we each have a reflection has light means energy, the energy of God is within each of us, then one could say from just a few short connections that God remembering or God being reminded is actually communal connection or communal consciousness. When the Israelites cry out and God remembers them, it may be when finally they understand communal consciousness, and until then had been almost too isolated into their own experiences and their own traumas to realize they're part of community. And it very well may be that the reminder of God and the notion of divine consciousness, call it, really be about the moments in which community realize they are in themselves a giant organism. Right? There's something very real to that perhaps reminding God is really about shaping us, not us individual, us as community. That Torah has this way of ritualizing communal consciousness. And so the Kohen Gadol is not engaged in private reflection. When he goes into the Holy of Holies, he is a steward of collective memory. And there's a profound difference between being an individual remembering their story and a community institutionalizing memory in a way that dignifies it. And it's something that we seek to understand today. It's something that we struggle with. When I was in Israel just a few weeks ago, we're starting to see this. The different places of memorial post-October 7th, most of them right now are run by families. And there is a temporal nature to it. You can see it in the infrastructure. Over time, the state is going to have to decide how they memorialize those spaces, and they're going to have to create the more permanent structures. We see the same thing in our country. How long before the September 11th memorial went up in New York, there were plenty of temporary memorial structures that were up because that's part of this collective memory. And then at some point, community has to institutionalize memory in a way that dignifies it and propels the community forward. And our text is talking about one of those institutionalized ways of telling the story. Personal memory asks whether I can carry what happened to me. Communal memory asks whether we can build structures that carry what happened to us. And it's a very different lift with a very different preparation, a very different weight to it. Personal healing can remain internal. Communal healing has to be something honored architecturally, has to be something shared physically. The stones are embedded into the garments of the leadership in this Torah portion. Every time the Kohen enters the sacred center, the people's story enters with him. Memory becomes visible, ritualized, non-negotiable, woven into the authority itself. So the question is, how do we do that? How do we make those moments? We have our blueprint in our text. How are we going to do that? If this is something that we wrestle with in right now as we are working towards reopening our sanctuary and building for this summer, how do we have that moment? Susan, you're absolutely right. Right now, as a lot is going on in this country, when you're in the moment, it's a little bit different. But at some point, there will have to be conversation about how to remember what's going on in this country when it comes to ICE and when it comes to citizens and their freedoms and their ability to live out these dreams. And by the way, the reason that we wait is because while a story is being unfolded, it would be irresponsible to create that institutionalized memory. But that's why there's the temporary ones in between. Yeah, Bert.
With Pesach coming up, every year I have the challenge of trying to make our family Seder meaningful in terms of what's going on. And Seder is, in fact, remembering. It's not communal relating in the sense of the entire, Jewish community, but in terms of family. And years ago, I took a bunch of Haggadot and put them together and made a Haggadah for our family that I end up changing a bit every year to reflect how our memory of slavery and freedom relates to what's going on now. So for me, that's a different kind of remembering, because that's what we're supposed to do at a Seder. We're supposed to remember the Exodus from Egypt, and we're supposed to feel it on a very individual basis, even though it was communal.
Not only that, not only the piece that you said, but go one step further. It's actually, that's intended in the structure of Seder. Is here is the Seder as it stands. Go through it monotonously, and you have to embed modern moment, your conscious thought into it. It's a requirement of Seder. A lot of the Sidurs you'll find actually have sparks of conversation spaces, not just because it's cool, but because that's how you're supposed to actually make sure to contextualize the story. It might be the most radical ritual of communal memory we've created, Bert. The Torah doesn't just say, remember that your ancestors left Egypt, right? It says you shall tell your children on that day. In every generation, right, a person is obligated to see themselves as if they personally left Egypt. In order to do that, it demands relevance. You have to take your psyche, your moment, your experience, and you are obligated to see yourself as if you left Egypt. The Seder doesn't allow the Exodus to just sit in the past. It refuses to let redemption become a museum, right? That's all of this. And you putting in the effort each year to tweak it or shift it or change it. By the way, just a plug, Haggadah.com, fabulous resource for the same thing. You can use but it forward still, yeah. Haggadot.com is this opportunity to make your own custom Haggadah with thousands and thousands of resources. It's really awesome. It constructs an experience in which memory must become present tense. And I want us to sit with that for a moment, because that's actually what Torah is doing with all of this. One of the beauties of our tradition is that we don't accept memory as past. It has to be present tense. In our text, in our Seder, Bert, now that you've gotten me on what I like to call a rabbinic tangent, number one, it's that we taste the bitterness. We recline in freedom. We ask questions. We interrupt the narrative. We personalize the story. The storytelling, it's not storytelling for information, it's storytelling for identity formation. Every single year. The brilliance of Seder is that, the institutionalized memory in a way that keeps it alive, because it understands that each of us might grab onto something psychologically profound or different, and it makes the memory remain abstract, and that is a superpower. It's the same superpower in why you're all here studying Torah. You're listening on a podcast is because you could just read Torah flat, but you wouldn't extract the beauty and the essence of it. Our text requires that we wrestle with this and talk amongst ourselves because we keep that formation alive. Yeah, Susan.
One thing I lost in the fire was B. Prentice, who was the preschool director when my kids were there, made a preschool Haggadah that had everything in it, and you could do it in under 5 minutes. And it was so precious.
Yeah, and that's a tool. It's a sacred tool in itself. People sometimes laugh about preschool Shabbat. I'm here doing preschool, like we just said. We had services this morning. It is a sacred tool to allow these kids to have that first foundation, not because it ends there, but because that's what grows into the experiences we're in now. Bert and then Alex.
Just quickly, a number of years ago, I put together, I got it off the internet and some books, a timeline of Jewish history, starting with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and then the Exodus, and then coming all the way up to today. And I laid out on a wall. I went through before the Seder with all the kids, it was grandkids and kids, all of the events, and laid them out in proportion on the wall. It was actually a very long wall, and went through the Exodus and then all the way up. And of course, the point at which they were born was like the last inch of this long timeline. But it went through everything and all of the events and all of the history as a way of just getting people to feel where we come from, which I think Daniel was talking about. I encourage everybody, if you've not done it, get real creative. Get real creative. And as Rabbi Sher was saying, go on the internet, find stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Alex.
Bert, I don't know if I need to reinvent the wheel. Can I get that timeline?
Yes.
You're like my Jewish ChatGPT. I don't need a. I have faith in your timeline. I'd love a copy.
Right.
But
put your email in the chat, please.
Will do. To get back to what you're saying, Rabbi, about before we started talking about the Haggadah and this reminder to God. I mean, in essence, is that what Torah and Torah study really is? The Torah is the sort of the vehicle, but Torah study is this reminder to God in a sense, because that's the communal part, maybe.
Look, I must admit, when we're in study, often is where an idea continues to take shape. This notion of a reminder for God really being that moment that have you ever been with a group and everyone in the group at some point just it clicks? You all see the vision in a similar way. You have a shared energy. Maybe it's a sport where everyone is cohesively playing in a way that at that point they know what the next person is going to do. There's these moments in which we somehow know the psyche of the person next to us. I think that that's what the rabbis couldn't name, but instead called divine consciousness.
It's like collective energy, when it's pinging off each other. Energy. What is it, like a Celestine prophecy?
But when you're in a space where you can feel that energy, there's a divine consciousness because the rabbis didn't have another way to explain. How do you explain a whole group of people that yearn for the same things, are excited for the same things, and nervous about the same things? They're not the same people, but they have these collective structures to them. And I think, going back to that example of when God first hears their cries and now here being reminded, they're both moments in which in order for that to happen, you have to take a lot of individuals and make them a consciousness together. Otherwise, God would have been hearing disjointed cries. But I think the reason God hears the cries from Egypt are because they have managed to become that collective. And so the rabbi's name for that was divine consciousness. Today, we continue it. It's exactly right, whether it be Torah study or other moments in which we don't Jewish alone.
Yeah, but we can't be a people as an individual. we are a people because we are a people, and that collective, it's like that reciprocal, the collective with God.
Yeah.
Granted, faith can be, of course, individual, but without the people, without the collective, how can there be that reciprocity?
Yeah. Look, there's actually one step even further, right? When memory becomes embodied and it becomes ritual, it becomes something that we perform together to shape who we are becoming, right? Whether it be services and prayers and whatever it might be. For a community trying to rebuild, this could be Palisades, this could be anywhere really. Trying to build forward without being defined solely by what has happened, that model seems really urgent. You can't dismiss what's happened. Judaism doesn't dismiss what happened. Every fast day that we have is because of the pain of moment. Now, Judaism also recognizes that you can't be overwhelmed by it, right? So, Tisha B'Av, what happens? Who can tell me what happens? What do the rabbis claim happened on the anniversary of Tisha B'Av? Anybody know?
Wasn't the temple destroyed?
Which temple?
First one.
Well, according to the rabbis, both temples.
Both.
The rabbis say both temples happened on this same day. And other catastrophes, like the expulsion from Spain or the origin root of the Holocaust, they go further to keep saying each one of those things happened on Tisha B'Av. What are the odds? It wasn't about it actually happening on Tisha B'Av. The rabbis pick a saddest day of the year. And they're bold enough and they're caring enough that we literally celebrate, honor having a saddest day of the year. So they go one step further and they say, let's park a few things there. I don't want 10 saddest days of the year, but they still have a saddest day of the year that they mark out to say, we're not going to forget what happened. We're going to spend 25 hours. We're going to fast. We're going to mourn for the temple's destruction. We're going to mourn for people wanting to rip us away from the timeline, but we're going to do it in one spot. We're going to have a memory tool for it. We're going to have a ritual item. We're going to do a thing. We're going to have Tisha B'Av. We don't build forward by pretending the past didn't occur, and we don't allow the past to freeze us in place. We create the ritual. We find the moment. We engrave it. We carry it on our shoulders. We acknowledge its weight. We hold it over our heart. We honor its feelings. We bring it before God always, which may mean we bring it into our highest spaces of meaning and leadership and decision-making. Yeah, Susan and then Lisa.
2 quick thoughts. We were all at Sinai, every one of us here.
Love that teaching. Yeah,
And
this notion's really powerful.
secondly, October 7th will, not in our lifetime, but maybe our children's, be celebrated with Tu B'Shvat.
With Tisha B'Av, yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
my accent's awful.
I do think that there is something very, very important about having a space to park it. Very much so. Lisa.
I was just going to say, yeah, you hear me? Okay. Last night we had Rosh Chodesh with Jessica, and she pointed out that this month Adar is actually set aside, and there are 2 of them on leap years, for joy. So there's an acknowledgement not just of a time of sadness, but that we have institutionalized the memory of joy and the need to remember that as well in the world. But I want to ask something. We're not the only ones who institutionalize communal study, but are you suggesting that we do it in the historical context, and that's what's unique?
So first of all, you should know one thing. My love for Judaism and all the things that I obsess over, and obsess is the word I will definitely choose, are not based on whether or not other groups have similar obsessible qualities. It's a really important piece. I always tell my kids, they get competitive, and I say, I'm a competitive person. I'm only competitive with me. I want to go faster than I was the time before. I want to go, I want to achieve something greater than what I did the last time. But I don't ever feel like my success is dim on someone else's success is being lit, right? Like and I think that there's a quality to that once lived in religion that was lost. I think a lot of these things we're talking about are somewhat shared. But let's take one step backwards. First of all, the placement of a time for joy and the placement of a time for sorrow and everything in between. My stump speech about why my life will be in service of the Jewish people is, how did the rabbis figure out the psychological relevance of needing time to park joy and time to park sadness and time to hold these things 2,000 years ago? How did they beat the DSM by so much, right? Is there something really powerful to that? And on top of it, Adar and Purim and this opportunity that's coming right 3 days from now, right? In your moment of the most frivolous joy you can experience, in the moment of having an absolute masquerade, you're supposed to give to other people, do charitable things, hear your story so that your joy and your absolute ruckus of a Purim is contextualized by memory. Our sadness and our joy is handled the exact same way, contextualized by memory. Now, what the rabbis do differently, if you follow the thread for that other question you had in there, is if we believe that the divine consciousness is something that comes from when the souls of individuals speak together, which I do believe, that idea of the shard of the divine, I believe the most godly moments I've had is an aha moment with others. It's sitting with them in their hardest moments or their happiest moments, or people that we get the blessing to be with them in both. And that's when we really feel God. There's other cultures that might have similar overlap to that, but the rabbis, to make sure that you might have the chance to do it, say nothing should be done alone. Whether it be Torah study, whether it be needing a minyan. When you first lose someone you love, we say, guess what? No one's going to leave your house for a week. That doesn't work for everyone. There's a good amount of introverted Jews that are like, come again? What's going to happen? But our tradition understands that that's needed. And then how do we end that? Take a walk. Take a walk alone. I really want to walk alone now. My friends have been at my house for a week. No, you have to walk with them still. Our tradition keeps saying that if you don't have in proximity to you more divine consciousness, that you're not connected to the core of this idea. And the ritual, going all the way back to wearing the names and holding that you're a part of a people, is that reminder that we never float off into isolation thinking that it might be deeper or more sacred. Isolation is not deep. It is not more sacred. Yeah. You want to go to a silent retreat, do me a favor, don't do it alone. Go with other people, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's the whole concept here. And the high priest bears the weight of that in a very real way.
Yeah, but ancient societies were communal societies. The whole
had to be, yeah.
Rising of individualism is something that happened later, and so we are an outgrowth of those ancient communal societies. But I guess we're taking it with us in a different interpretation.
Well, part of it, Lisa, is the obligation. Most of those ancient societies aren't here. You have an obligation. Whereas people might see that otherwise there was a snarky t-shirt that would list ancient societies and say they tried to kill us, and then they'd list them all and then be like, we're still here. That snark is not the part I want to focus on. The part I want to focus on is we're still here, which means we have an obligation to make sure that we don't stop that piece of it. And Susan, you're absolutely right. Zoom, though, has its own set of shortcomings at times, has made sure that once again we don't have to be alone. There are times that I will cook on Zoom with someone else cooking. We're not even cooking the same meal, but we're both just chatting it up by the stove, right? Like there's an ability to have that connection. If memory remains private, it can isolate. Memory itself can isolate. If memory becomes communal and honored, it dignifies. Now, it's a hard process to get there. It often takes a lot of consensus. But when memory can become communal and honored, it dignifies the entire experience. The high priest does not carry anonymous pain. He carries names. The Seder does not tell an anonymous story. It tells our story. Names and narrative transform trauma into belonging. It's this incredible power in that. Our job is to make sure that we're fueling it. And when we lose some of those memories, when we lose the items that held them, we have an obligation to tell a new story. I've shared with many of you something that Cantor Frankel said to me just 2 days after the fire, when I was specifically mourning the loss of the Kiddush cup that we had used each week to bless Shabbat. And he said to me, the cup that you go and replace with now, your grandchildren will tell the story that this is the cup that your family refused to stop blessing and used when in a moment of that pain. So we have an obligation to write new inscriptions, to put them on our chest plate, to not be weighted down by loss, but rather weighted down by the burden of retelling the story. And I think that that's something that we all have to hold and understand and navigate forward with. I think that that's the deeper promise of Tetzaveh. We're not asked to forget in order to move forward. We're asked to carry wisely and to transition memory into honor and to ensure that what shaped us neither erases nor is allowed to define us entirely. And that when we walk into the most sacred spaces, when we walk into our own situations of Holy of Holies, we don't ever walk in empty-handed. We enter that carrying one another and the stories of the communities we choose to be a part of. Any thoughts? Any pushback? Rabbi Bernstein will be back next week, so you don't have to deal with my shenanigans too many times. Yes, Susan.
So an embarrassing memory from long ago, but when right after Toby was a baby and we went to Jeff's aunt's Seder, and they had 1 minute of the Haggadah, and then it was just a family dinner. And Seder had always been so holy for my family. I just picked up the baby, left, and went home. And we've now been married well over 40 years because what Jeff did was he said, Dad, Susan had a headache. Could you give me a ride home? Because I hadn't even said anything to my husband. And those are holy memories.
When we know the other person well enough, when we know the community we stand by. For all of you who take the time out of your schedule to engage in Torah, I know that some of you might at times be seeking out meaning that you're looking for, but what you're adding into the system by being a part of that seeking and that collaboration and that sharing is a strengthening that allows us to know that we're also still going to be around in the next generation and the generation after that, and telling the stories and holding the items and uplifting tchotchkes. And when we lose those things, we're not going to be so buried by the sadness that we can't forge new ones. Because again, and I leave you with this, we do not enter holiness empty-handed. We always enter holiness holding community with us.